Just yesterday, Dharma Productions' Gunjan Saxena, the Kargil Girl, movie released on Netflix. But even before the release, Indian Air Force has written a letter to Central Board of Film Certification regarding the negative portrayal, the undue negative portrayal of the Air Force. As Tushar has watched this movie, so I will ask him that what kind of portrayal is mentioned here. Tushar.
Hey Nishta, hi. Nishta, I think the Indian Air Force had the problem with the trailer because some of the scenes that were shown in the trailer, some of the instances regarding the interaction between the character of Gunjan Saxena in the movie played by Janvi Kapoor and her Air Force counterparts, the male counterparts, they were seen to be a little undue, portraying an undue negative image of the Air Force, probably sexist image of the Air Force against women. And the Indian Air Force wrote to the CBFC, that is the Central Board for Film Certification, asking that how could the movie be allowed to release or where were the clearances and so on. It's a complaint that has been released based on the trailer itself. Now, let me tell you, if the Indian Air Force did not like the trailer of the movie, if they go on to see the complete movie, which just released yesterday on Netflix, they would probably be far more angrier than they are right now. Because the scenes in the movie, they have been unduly negative against the Indian Air Force, their portrayal of it, and even the Indian Army, given the characters in the movie and how their mentality towards women has been portrayed. Even though it's a story from 1999 and the early 90s, it's still it's still a very negative portrayal of the Indian Air Force and probably of the Indian armed forces collectively.
Oh, so what can we see in other movies which shows like war stories and about Indian Army or Air Force, how they have portrayed?
Well, see, there are not a lot of great war movies to be spoken about in India. I mean, even yesterday, Gunjan Saxena, the movie which has released, it's a very mediocre film. It has just one or two noteworthy actors, one of being Pankaj Tripathi, who we've seen in Mirzapur. But there have not been a lot of movies in India. I'll talk about the scenes yesterday first, which I saw in Gunjan Saxena, which came across as a little problematic to me. Of course, the real Gunjan Saxena, the Lieutenant Commander, Gunjan Saxena, she was involved in the making of the movie. So I'm assuming there was something that must have passed through her in terms of the production, in terms of the script. But even then, there were scenes which showed that the Indian Air Force, the men in the Indian Air Force, the officers in the Indian Air Force, they're not at all cooperative with the women. They're not very open to the idea of a women in the Indian Air Force. Now, even if we had to assume that this was in 1999, more than 20 years ago, and this was somewhat possible, where is the line between the creative liberty the film may have taken and the actual story? Because the film very conveniently in the beginning it says that some creative liberties have been taken, but we salute the patriotism of the Indian Air Force. So we don't really know where the line has been drawn. That's the first problem. Now, coming to the portrayal of the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force or other armed forces. Well, see, Nishta, I can remember 3-4 movies, one of them prominently being directed by Farhan Akhtar, which was Laksh, which came in 2004, which starred Hrithik Roshan. That showed the Indian Army in very professional light. Then there was JP Datta's Border, which came back in 1997. That had a little melodramatic, but yet a very professional portrayal of the Indian Army. So, and that story was set in 1971. So even then, we've not got a lot of great war movies in India, even when it comes to the Air Force or Indian Navy. But whatever movies we've got, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, it has been shown as very righteous. Now, also allow me to expand on the portrayal of the armed forces in Hollywood. Top Gun, which is one of the best American Air Force movies or American Navy movies rather ever made. It has actually a bit of a negative portrayal of how men behave with women in the beginning. That came out in 1986, so those times were different. But then it's not always you get an ideal portrayal of the armed forces in Hollywood movies, but in Bollywood you always get them. And yesterday's Gunjan Saxena was an exception to that.
Yes. So what you say that the Central Board of Film Certification has now there is a doubt that whether putting just a disclaimer about the patriotism of Indian Air Force is it sufficient. So I would like to point out here that though Indian Air Force has went to CBFC, but I don't think there can be done much thing because CBFC doesn't have control over OTT platforms, and also till last year it had only pre-censorship, not pre-censorship but self-censorship. They had certain self-regulatory codes in which there were certain conditions that these will be followed, and rest they were doing whatever they wanted to do. And this year only we saw the formation of digital content complaint. So from this year we have a complaint thing that after the release, if anything is found objectionable or harmful, then it can be complained, but pre-censorship we cannot see. So in such conditions, we have a doubt that how will CBFC react to this thing.
Absolutely, Nishta. Nishta, the damage has already been done. The movie is out in the open. It must have been uploaded on other pirated websites. So the damage has already been done. Of course, in the end of the movie, there's a message that now there are more than 1,600 officers, female officers, serving in the Indian Air Force. But the damage has already been done. My only issue is, even if we had to believe for one wild second that yes, the officers of the Indian Air Force were somehow rude towards the first women pilot officer in serving in the war zone, we do not really know where the line between reality and creative liberty lies. We do not know how much of it is fiction, how much of it is fact. And this is where the problem is. There's no authentication to this story. There's no way one can authenticate it as a viewer, and this is where the big problem is.